All right, so what we're going to talk about here a little bit is comparing cleans and snatches, okay? First of all, the difference between the two, they're very similar. And this is why I like to bring this up, because a lot of times people are a little afraid of snatches, or they don't understand snatches. They've done a lot of cleans, but they haven't really done any snatches. The pulling pattern is very similar, though. This is why when you start with somebody new, do you teach them the clean first, or you teach them the snatch first? I always teach the clean first. Some people teach the snatch first, and that's fine, okay? If that works for you, that's fine. But if you always have a reason why you do things, I think you're going to have a lot of success, okay? If you have the why behind it, and then you can get that point across to your athletes, they'll buy into what you're doing more, because they're not doing it just for the sake of doing it, or just because you said so. If they have a reason for it, and you have a reason, and it fits into your program, then that's why we do what we do. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here is just to get a few points across as to why I do the clean first. Actually, 3 reasons. Number one, what I find is that some people are just simply afraid of putting the bar over their head. That fear factor keeps them from wanting to do snatches at all. Okay, so what I find is if I teach cleans first, and you teach them how to miss and everything, that's a pretty easy deal to do. If you do that, then you don't have that fear factor. So the second thing, and that is that once they learn how to do the clean, the pulling pattern is very similar. The only difference is where the bar ends up. Okay? So when you're doing a clean, the pulling pattern is ending up here. Snatch, pulling pattern, it just ends up here. But the pulling pattern itself is the same. And then the third reason why I teach cleans first is because of the environment that I was in for a majority of my career. I was a high school physical education and weight training teacher. And what I found was that I had a lot of kids that I was working with that went on to college. Most of the time when they went on to college, their new coaches, new strength coaches, didn't say, well, let me see how your clean technique looks. Or I'm sorry, they would say clean technique. They wouldn't say, let me see what your snatch technique looks like. Now, so we did a lot of snatches, but we did cleans first to make sure that technique was pretty good, okay? Then what is the difference between let's get the terminology right here first. What's the difference between a power clean and a clean? Well, for that matter, let's even back up farther than that. The word weightlifting. In the United States, we don't quite have the idea of what that word is. Around the country, when you say that you're a weightlifter, they understand you're doing snatches and clean and jerks. In this country, if you say you're a weightlifter, first thing they say is, well, how much can you bench? That's not what we do. Okay, well, we do some, but it's just that's not the big thing that we do. So we have to understand the terminology. So it's the same thing between a power clean and a clean. Usually, I even differentiate, and I'll say power clean as opposed to a squat clean, because the difference is where you catch it. And the reason I have to say that is because a lot of times I've heard very reputable strength coaches say, we don't do power cleans, we do hang cleans. Well, if you understand the concept, a power clean is, basically it's telling you where you're catching the bar. So you're catching the bar above parallel, as opposed to a squat clean, don't pull it as high, and you squat all the way under it. Get to handle more weight that way, you get to work your legs coming up. So there's a little bit different, but the pulling pattern is the same. But the difference here is that a power clean and a clean is where you catch it. When they say they don't do power cleans, they do a hang clean, chances are they're doing a hang power clean. Okay? So what it means is the hang means where they pull it from, as opposed to where they catch it. So any position except from the floor would be from the hang. Okay? Just so we get that terminology right, because people do get that pretty confused. Not everybody likes to do cleans and snatches. I understand that, okay? For a variety of reasons, whether it's a fear factor, you don't have time to learn it, whatever the reasons are. Maybe the sport coaches that you're working with, they have specific things. Well, I'm working with volleyball players and basketball. I don't want to do anything overhead. Well, it's kind of nice to see Hootie doing. Yesterday I was watching her train her 6'8", 7-foot basketball players. Oh my God, they were doing snatches. Okay? So the point is that if it fits into your system, if it fits your philosophy, and you want your athletes doing it for the reasons that you think are important, then that's what you do. If you don't, then as much of a purist as I am, I understand that not everybody wants to do that. or has a program that they want to put it into that. So it's one of those things where you got to find out, get as many tools into your toolbox as possible, learn as much as you can, be open to continue learning, and if it's something that fits into your program, then by all means, there's value to it. Speaking of value, all right, these are the things we talk about. 4 major things here of reasons why you do the Olympic lifts. Number 1, obviously, is the power. I mentioned this morning at the warm-up, I talked about Vasily Alexiev back in the day, 360-pound heavyweight for the Soviet Union, had a 39-inch vertical jump. I don't care who you are, that's pretty impressive, okay? Because weightlifters are the most powerful athletes in the world when you think of how much weight they move, how fast they move it, how fast they move their body. So my point is, if you want some power, training the Olympic lifts is a great way of doing that. It's not the only way, but it's a way of doing it, and not to mention the athletes really like it. Second thing is strength. This same Alexiev that could do a 39-inch vertical jump squatted 1,000 pounds. Okay, and this is no powerlifting, super suit, super wraps. This is a high bar, no knee wraps, just down and up, thinking nothing of it. So they have the strength base. The third thing, and I mentioned this morning a little bit, and that is their flexibility. Weightlifters have to be flexible to get into those correct positions. Okay, they even did a study over in Europe with 35 different sports, and they found that weightlifters were in the flexibility category. They were ranked number 2. The only sport that had more flexible athletes were the gymnasts. So that's pretty impressive, because a lot of times when you think of weightlifters, you think of big old muscle-bound guys. No, not good athletes that are weightlifters. Okay. Finally, the fourth reason, and a lot of people don't realize this, that weightlifters, if you train like a weightlifter, you get aerobic benefits. Things like decreased pulse rate, decreased blood pressure, increased VO2 max. Okay? Things that you would expect to be training aerobically, you're getting some of the same benefits training anaerobically. So if you know anything about the physiology without getting too much into the science of it, you can train anaerobically and still get the aerobic benefits. But if all you do is aerobic, you're going to lose a lot of your anaerobic capacity. Your athletes, I would bet most of your athletes are in more of an anaerobic type sport than they are aerobic. So a good bit of your training, I think, should be part of that. Again, this is something that, if it fits into your scheme, these are some of the reasons. And if you train anaerobically, just a real quick example, anybody keep track of the CrossFit Games? Okay, the really good athletes at the national level, most of those guys and girls, they train like weightlifters a majority of the time. Then when it comes time to the competition, then they focus more on the events that they have to do. The guy that won the last 2 years, Matt Frazier, he was one of my weightlifters on my weightlifting team. I can't blame him for leaving the weightlifting world to go to CrossFit, because then he could make some money. But the point is that if you look at the way those guys are built, that's how they train, because they get the benefits from that, okay? So again, what we're talking about is, if you think the value is something that works for you, then you put it into your system, and we'll help you out with that as much as we can, okay? I like to compare the clean and the snatch, because the pulling patterns are the same. I teach the clean first, just because of those reasons. And I can tell you, though, that I see Heather in the audience here, so I'm going to use you as an example. I've done it the last 2 talks here. I worked with her a little bit yesterday. She said, can you work with me on the clean just to see how her technique is? So I made a couple of adjustments, and they looked really good. And then she said, if you have a few more minutes, can we do a little bit with the snatch? I've never snatched before. I said, sure, because I knew what was going to happen. The first time she tried it, and you can vouch for this, the first time she tried it, boom, she hit it. My point is that once you learn the patterns for the clean, the snatch comes along pretty quickly. Okay, and I hope it worked out as well as you thought it would, but I knew it was going to happen. So the point here is that if you want to do snatches as part of your program, obviously they have to do the overhead squat a little bit first and some of the lead-ins, but once they learn the clean, it correlates. Okay, Tony, would you mind? Tony's with Play, and he's going to demonstrate here for me a little bit, just so I can talk and not have to try to lift at the same time. All right, so what we do is we teach it from the top down. What that means is the first thing and we'll talk about the clean progression right now. So the first thing we do is to make sure that they can receive the bar correctly in that front squat position. Bar on the clavicles and the shoulders, the hands in that clean grip. And a lot of things we'll talk about here, and again, it's not a whole lot of time, but we're going to talk about just basic science. Because I know a lot of times people say, well, Leo, you're just old school, and we need to find out what the Russians are doing and the Chinese, because they're doing this new modern stuff that, no, they're not. They're doing the same thing over and over. It's old school stuff, and it still boils down to simple physics. Okay? Because center of gravity doesn't change over the years. It is what it is. Your area of base, okay? If these are my feet, this area right here is where you want that bar to be, the center of gravity of the bar to be over that middle of that area of base. So if you understand those principles, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. We want to try to put as much force into the ground as possible to create more force coming the other way, and as much vertical power as possible. Some people advocate kicking the bar out. That's horizontal. We don't want that. We want as much force going up as possible. So if the center of gravity of the bar, as I'm looking at here, if I were to drop a line, the center of gravity of the bar should be right here, through his center of gravity, through his knees, through the middle of his foot. That's balance. So when he does his front squat, so widen your feet just a little bit, we're going to try to keep his elbows up and keep that same stable back position as Rob was talking about in that one session. Okay, he's going to go as deep as he can in good form. Now he's able to go all the way down. Come on back up. But do it again and watch where the bar is in relation to that middle of the foot. The center of gravity of the bar stays over the middle of his foot because his center of gravity isn't shifting back. It's just straight up and down. Okay, relax for a second. Now, some people will have flexibility issues and they won't be able to go down all the way like he just did. They might go halfway and then they start doing this, or their heels start coming up. That's where they stop then. You stop where you need to stop and still keep that good form. What that means is that the difference between a power clean and a clean, he could do a clean because he can do a full front squat all the way down. If somebody can only go halfway without breaking form, they can still do power cleans. It would be unrealistic to expect them to do a squat clean, that's all. Okay? So what we're going to try to do is, if he can do a decent, at least partial front squat, let's try a power clean. But we're going to do a power clean from that power position. The power position is, let's see what you got here. Now the bar is around mid-thigh, and I say around mid-thigh because everybody's limb lengths are different, okay? Shorter torso, longer arms, whatever, but around mid-thigh. So the weight should be toward the ball of the foot a little bit because it's pretty much a jumping motion. He's not going to literally jump off the ground because we want to keep that ground contact. And I think Hootie was talking about that with the type of shoes that they have. Now, he doesn't have his lifting shoes on because I kind of pulled him out of the audience here. But from this position, now we can make everything as vertical as possible. Try to recreate that vertical jump motion. Some people say the power position should be here. I disagree. First of all, the bar now is too far forward. His body is back, so the combined center of gravity is back behind him, so his initial movement, instead of up, is going to be back. So that combined center of gravity, we want as much lined up as possible. Shift the weight hair forward, right there. All right, now keep it real close, power clean, ready, go. Okay, good. See how close he kept? He kind of bumped himself a little bit, but that was close. Do it again. He's catching it in that semi front squat position. Ready, go. Good. He's shuffling his feet out a little bit. That's a pretty good position. Now, if they can do it from there, and it's a static start, so they're not going to be able to handle a whole lot of weight, but at least they have the idea of that triple extension. Now, let's get back just for a second to that front squat. If they can't do a good front squat with it racked completely, they shouldn't do a power clean from that position or any position. If they can't receive it correctly, how many times have you seen some of your athletes that either hold the bar here or up here or down here? Do you see that? If you see that, they shouldn't be cleaning. Now, so there's two benefits that we get from doing cleans, okay? One is that triple extension, so that's that force production, triple extension from the hips, knees, and ankles. Technically, the ankles aren't extending, but we'll call it triple extension anyway. So that's the benefit of that. If they can receive the bar correctly, now they're getting the benefit of the core stability. They're working on eccentric movement. They're working on deceleration. These are the things that are required in sport. Where do most injuries happen in sport? Stopping, starting, decelerating. This teaches their body to absorb forces. So if they can receive the bar correctly, Now they get the force production and they get the force absorption. If they can't receive it correctly, at least have them do the pulls to get the benefit of that pulling motion. Okay? All right. So if they can do it from the power position, all right, review the power position again. Below the knees. Now, in this below the knees position, this is the toughest one. Do you remember this morning, those of you who were here, we were working on the hamstrings? Okay? So in this position, he should feel the hamstrings, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Back is nice and flat and tight. Stable back like they were talking about earlier. His focal point tends to be straight ahead. Some people drop the head down here because they want to keep everything in line, including the cervical vertebrae. I always tend to do the same thing. Even though this isn't in line, the focal point stayed the same for me. If I look down, that focal point would change as I pulled, and that would throw me off. And besides, it's not really hurting anything up here because nothing's happening here. Okay? So just get up in the power position again. All right, now everything's in line again. All right, so back down below the knees. All right, so even though this is out of line a little bit, it doesn't matter. All right, so we're going to ease it up, brush through, and go. Good. Very nice power clean from below the knees. So if he can do that pretty well, and then we want to try to get even more of a full range of motion, then we can do them from the floor. All right, let's put plates on real quick. No, better yet, let's do this, just to save a little bit of time here. I'm trying to get you the idea of the correlation between a clean and a snatch, okay? The way I do it is this. When I start with cleans, if they can get it from the power position, and the clean now, and then they move the progression from here down to here. Once they've mastered the clean from here, now I can incorporate the snatch from there, okay? So basically what it boils down to, wherever the clean has moved to, the snatch can go to the previous spot where the clean was. Does that make sense? So in other words, learn the clean here, move the clean down to here, incorporate the snatch up here because the clean was already learned. And you'll notice that the power position is going to be a little bit higher. So trying to show you the correlation of the pull being pretty much the same. All right? Now he's got his snatch grip. Just get in that same power position. But the difference here is that because his hands are wider, the bar is farther up the thigh. I call it the upper thigh position as opposed to mid thigh. Keep that same position. Now look where the bar is on the thigh. Move your hands back into the clean grip. Look where the bar is in relation to the thigh. Okay? Same position, but now with the hands wider. Widen it up again. Same position, but the power position is higher. All right, now, from there, instead of catching here, we're just going to put it over his head, and we're going to try to press himself under the bar. Ready? Go. Oh, and he did a squat snatch, power snatch. Ready? Wait, do it again. Do it again. All right, now, relax the traps a little bit. What we're trying to do is we're trying to keep only tightening the muscles we need to. The more you practice, the more it becomes smooth just because you got to relax some muscles to allow others to contract. That's what we're trying to do here. So everything up here should be relaxed. So at the top of the pull, then he has that last little finish to help pull himself under the bar. Okay, ready? Go. Good, okay? Power snatch as opposed to a snatch. The one he did before was a snatch. The one he just did was a power snatch, okay? So the whole idea here is the pulling pattern is the same. All right, now let's put the weights on.
Coach, do you ever use the word hang?
Use the word what?
Hang.
I do, yeah. It's just that hang from where, that's all. So basically what we're doing is when I'm teaching it, I just call it the power position, but it is from the hang. But sometimes I'll say, let's do the hang from below the knees or hang from the power position. So just depends on whatever terminology you want. Okay?
I just learned the difference, so I trying to figure out.
Okay, and that's actually a good point because sometimes everybody has a little bit different terminology, and that's fine, as long as you're getting across the same point, okay? I mean, just like when people say, well, we don't do power cleans, we do hang cleans, we got to make sure they understand what the terminology actually means, okay? Now, the start off the floor is something that's a little confusing, but before we do that, just a little bit about when you receive the bar. What we're trying to do is we're trying to receive or catch the bar when it weighs 0, okay? So, if you take a 10-pound plate, throw it up in the air, for a split second it weighs 0 before it starts coming down. That's where you want to meet the bar because you don't want it crashing on you. This is why it's very important to have as much contact with your feet as possible. I've heard some people say, well, when we do cleans, we want them jumping up in the air and shuffling and getting their feet out. Well, if it's all about force production in the platform, where's your force when you're jumping up in the air? There is none, okay? So if you keep contact here, not only is it more force, but you tend to meet the bar before it starts coming down on you. If you're jumping up in the air, by the time you come down, so's that weight. And those of you who've lifted know what I'm talking about. When that weight comes down on you, a sucker feels heavy. If you meet it, it just feels so light. That's what we're trying to do. So that timing is pretty important. All right, now, so the start position for getting back to the clean again, okay? Start position, go ahead. Now, we've learned to do the clean from below the knees. Now what we're going to do is go from the floor to below the knees. Okay, just hold that position for a second. And again, his focal point is straight ahead. Shoulders above the hips, hips above the knees. Right there, and his shoulders are in front of the bar. The immediate movement is to keep that back, use it as a stabilizer. We don't want to lift with the back. We don't want to round the back. Keep that same flat back. And all he's going to do is have the hips and shoulders come up together, keeping that angle the same. So when that happens is he should end up in that same below the knees position that we pulled from. Okay, ready? Go. Can you feel the hamstrings? Very nice. Back down. Do it again. Clean from there. Go. Okay? But the point here is that most people will screw it up off the floor. All right, go ahead and put it down. Because people tend to be quad dominant. So instead of pulling from here to here, what they'll do is here, here. Do you ever see anybody lift off the floor and they get bloody shins or scraped up shins? That's because the hips and shoulders aren't coming up together, because if they do, watch what happens to the shins. They get out of the way automatically. But now I'm in that below the knees position. People don't like to do this though, because that means they have to have strong hamstrings. This is why this morning we did some RDLs to practice getting in that position. Just because they tend to be quad dominant, we really need to work that off the floor. Even my top level lifters will do a lot of lifts where they pause below the knees just to get that idea. Okay? All right, one more time from the floor. Set.
With the pause?
Yeah, with the pause. Go. See how the knees come back? Now the bar's over the middle of the foot. Go. He didn't time that one quite as well. Did you see the bar kind of come down on him? It's pretty light too. That's part of the deal. Okay? All right. Can you snatch it from there?
Yeah.
All right. The same type of concept here. Probably with the snatch grip, he's going to have his shoulders in front of the bar, maybe just a little bit more because the hands are wider. But other than that, the pull is pretty similar. Okay?
Power snatch.
Power snatch, yeah. Go. Go. Okay, got a little bit of a loop up the top, but overall that's a pretty good idea. Now, again, if they can't do it from the floor, at least they can do it from the other positions that they end up with same purpose that we're trying to get. The triple extension on the pole, and that turnover, and that core stability, and the deceleration by receiving the bar. Okay, so if you can take parts of what Olympic weightlifters do, I think you're going to get a pretty good benefit from it. Yeah, Brett?
Quick question. First of all, phenomenal job. There's
Thank you.
very few people that do, can do as great a work you do technically demonstrating everything and keeping it very simple and memorable. So great work there.
Thank you.
Going back to where you were talking about how some people try to get their power position here instead of preloaded.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend. He's a fantastic competitive weightlifter, also a huge jackass, and he wants to argue all the time about, I'm taught here this, don't do the preload. We go back and forth a good bit. I'm not worried about who's right. I'm worried about where did the origin of this kind of philosophy come from, because some of the athletes I deal with are so lordotic. Trying to generate force from here, right, already puts them into a terrible position. And they're not using anything that we don't.
You just answered your own question. That all makes.
Who's teaching that? I mean, I get it.
I know a couple of people who are, and I just disagree. It's just because what are we trying? We're trying to produce as much vertical force as possible. If you're in this position, almost automatically you got to go back.
Right.
We want vertical, and then when they catch the bar, the feet should shuffle out.
That was part of his argument. He said, well, most people hop forward. It's good to jump.
No.
And I'm like, that doesn't.
They hop forward.
He was saying
doing what you're doing, they're going to hop backward.
No. I'm saying when he.
To counteract.
Oh yeah.
Do you understand what I'm?
Yeah, you're counteracting. Yeah.
It's a 2-for-1. I go, no, it's not. You're assuming somebody's going to do something. If they do that, then coach them up. you know, but he was just very adamant. I want to make sure, I mean, I'm not above being wrong, so I just want to get your take on that if, you know, if you had a little bit more insight.
Let's put it this way. How do they do their pulls? Like if they do a clean pull or a snatch pull, to me, that should end up here. Because that keeps the bar in close, keeps the bar over that middle of the area of base. And where do they go if they're here? Can they actually? No, if their initial movement is back, they're not making it vertical, and they're not going to be able to hold that position. Okay. I think that explains the answer right there.
I've been going back and forth on that for about 5 years now. He can lift more than I can in that particular exercise. So
you know what? If it works for him, fine. If you're working with athletes though. And if he's a weightlifter and it works for him, that's fine. I'm just saying that you want to work off of biomechanical principles that have been proven over time.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say is the kid, if you saw him, I mean, he's basically a guy that God put on earth to be a weightlifter. And so I said, listen, man, you're a little biased, right? Your anthropometry puts you in these positions.
Exactly.
Not everybody's like that. You got to be aware of that.
All right. Just to give you an example, back in the 1976 Olympics, this shows how old I am, there was a lifter from Bulgaria, Mitkov, his name was, okay? World record snatcher. And literally, all the stuff we just talked about how you start the weight off the floor, this is literally how he would start. His back was rounded. He was looking straight, actually between his feet. His arms were bent. But when he got to that power position, it was perfect. Are we going to teach everybody to do that? No. Maybe that works for him. I don't think what you want your athletes to do is anything but biomechanically sound stuff. Say, for instance, you teach a kid to do that, and he ends up jumping back, trying to snatch or clean, they hurt themselves.
N equals 1.
Yeah. If you stick to the biomechanical principles, things that have been proven over time to work, then if somebody does get hurt, because stuff happens. I mean, I can tell you weightlifting is very safe, but it's like anything else. Stuff happens. But at least if you ever get called in a court of law, because you know how our society is now, they'll sue over anything. Don't stick your hand. They literally have to put a sign on a lawnmower. Don't stick your hand under a moving lawnmower. Well, no shit, I think. But you have to put a sign there because somebody sued over that. So the point here is that if you go into court, you can say, this is why we teach this. These are the biomechanical principles. These have worked over the years. This is what research shows work. Don't just do things willy-nilly. Speaking of not doing things willy-nilly, don't think that this 20-minute blurb and the little warm-up this morning makes you an expert and then you can go out and use this stuff. Make sure you understand and learn how to teach the skill. If you don't have a USAW certification already, do that. Get that, because that at least is a start. And it takes time to develop an eye to be able to fix people's problems and teach the technique correctly. I have my own courses that I do that I try to make them focus a little bit more on strength coaches as opposed to USAW that's more weightlifter coach oriented. So there are options out there. Check, I hate to self-promotion here, but tottentraining.com. Okay, I have different things that are available. I go to different seminars to speak, but I also go to colleges and high schools and I try to customize my seminars for what you need. Maybe it's working with your coaches. Maybe it's, I worked with one place where I spent 2 hours with the coaches and then they brought in their athletes and I worked with the coaches while they worked with their athletes. Whatever works for you. Whatever. I have somebody that's working with me now that's working with doing some leadership skill things. The stuff that Brett's doing with the, dealing with behaviors and things. All that stuff. You want to be a better all-around coach. So the more you can learn, the better. And don't think you have all the answers. I've been around for a long time, and I've picked up a lot of knowledge over the time. But I don't know it all. I'm not even. If you find somebody who thinks they know it all, run away really fast and really far.
They don't know it all.
Yeah. What's that?
They probably don't know it all.
Yeah, and the frustrating part is the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So if you come across somebody who thinks they know it all, I've been sitting here listening to all these talks all day. I got like 10 pages of notes. Hey, I know it all. No, I don't. I'm always learning. So there's a lot of young folks here and even some of the older guys. Keep learning, okay? That's the main thing. So if you need any help with anything, please be in touch. I have a bunch of my cards out on the table, so that's why we're here. And I bet you if you contact Brett or if you contact Mike or you contact we're all the same way. We just want to help everybody.